did my research project on building a community within a classroom environment, so that was kind of my area of study. So if we look at the outline for my PowerPoint, we're just going to start with the introduction. I'll talk about the context and the connection to literature, then I'll talk about my methods, results, possible modifications, and then I'll end with some next steps in conclusion. So to begin, in an advancing world of technology, children are often disconnected in the real world, resulting in a lack of communication and face-to-face interactions with their peers. As educators, it is important that we are building classroom communities for our students so that they continue to develop their social skills and have opportunities to grow. A classroom community is formed when students come together to work towards a common goal of learning, and they feel empowered and invested in the classroom setting. Building a classroom community that's inclusive and welcoming takes a lot of preparation and time. It can be affected by the classroom environment, the students' needs, the teacher's goals, and teaching the curriculum. When a community is properly formed in the classroom, students are engaged in their learning and social environment. They are better able to develop their social skills and knowledge and grasp the opportunities that can help them reach their full potential, pursue lifelong learning, and contribute to society. The classroom community promotes social and emotional development for the students by teaching them skills such as regulating their emotions, problem solving, responsibility, and collaboration with their peers. They help create a foundation for the classroom by creating inclusion, trust, security amongst all the students in the classroom. So if we look at the purpose of my project, it was to examine the importance of building a classroom community and how it affects the students in the classroom. And then my main research question was, how do educators build a classroom community that is inclusive, and how does it impact the students socially and academically? So if we look at the context of my placement, my school is located in Southern Ontario, specifically in Hamilton. There are approximately 450 students at my school, and my placement was in a grade 3/grade 4 classroom. If we look at the students in the classroom, there are approximately 22 students in the classroom, 11 boys and 11 girls. There's one student with an IEP and one student with a behavior management plan. So now if we're looking at how it connects to literature, we're just going to start with the goals of a community. So a community is a safe place where no one's attempting to fix, change, heal, or convert anyone else. They include various points of view, individual differences, and opinions. They have different qualities such as respect, caring, trust, commitment, inclusion, and empowerment. Creating a community in the classroom displays less alienation, it improves motivation, there's less student social behavior, there's an increased commitment among students and the teachers. Classroom communities help to foster students' social and emotional development. They help teach about social skills such as responsibility and collaboration, and they help create positive relationships among their peers and with the teacher. Students who feel accepted, respected, and liked in the classroom tend to work harder, achieve more, and attribute more importance to schoolwork. This creates a sense of inclusion and acceptance among peers in the classroom. So if we look, there are 4 stages that take place when a teacher is trying to create a sense of community in the classroom. These 4 stages are pseudo-community, chaos, emptiness, and a genuine community. So I'll just kind of explain those 4 stages. So the first stage, pseudo-community, it happens during the early days or the first couple weeks of school. And this stage refers to the optimism that the teacher and the students feel about each other and what they're going to learn and accomplish in the school year. However, once a student acts out unexpectedly or in an unacceptable manner, the class is often thrown into the next stage, which is referred to as chaos. And the teacher must find ways to balance teaching the curriculum, creating a classroom community, and balancing the students' individual needs. Also, during the second stage of chaos, the students often start to test its teachers' limits to see what they can and cannot get away with. And during this stage, a teacher is often restating and reiterating the classroom rules and reestablishing their limits. During these times, there may be a high level of frustration between the students and the teacher due to having to reestablish the rules and the limits within the classroom. As we move into the next stage, which is the emptiness stage, the students start to realize that the school year is going to be different than the last year, and they start to miss how things were with their teacher from the year before. Their current teacher starts to feel pressure to have everything organized and in place for the students, and during this stage, the classroom community is beginning to be formed by the teacher because they've gotten to know their students. There's also a line of communication that is spoken between the students and the teacher. As we move into the last stage, which is the genuine community, there is a sense of acceptance amongst everyone in the classroom. The teacher is more aware of who their students are and the types of problems that may occur within the classroom, and the students start to develop a more accepting attitude for the school year as they start to notice there's differences between their current teacher and their past teacher, and they start to accept what the new school year has in store for the students. During this stage, the community has been formed in the classroom. However, the teacher now has to maintain that sense of community by using different strategies and theories to maintain it in the classroom. So we move on. I did find there was 2 theories associated with classroom community, which is the situated learning theory and the collaborative learning theory. So these theories were chosen because learning occurs in the process of collaboration, and not in the hands of individuals. It is mediated by the differences of the perspectives of the teacher and the students. So the situated learning theory declares that learning is, by nature, a social activity and is embedded within activity, context, and culture. This theory stresses the intersection of learners and the tools, activities, and social context of the learning situation. Social interaction and collaboration are essential components of situated learning because learners become involved in a community of practice which embodies beliefs and behaviors to be acquired. The collaborative learning theory can be defined as peer-to-peer learning that fosters deeper thinking in the classroom and is a key for developing critical thinking skills. Group learning helps students develop their high-level thinking, oral communication, self-management, and leadership skills. In this theory, a teacher establishes the boundaries and the students distribute the work and then assemble the parts to complete the assignment. And then there's also strategies that can support classroom community. So just a couple examples, you can implement routines and assign classroom roles to students. You can have student of the week for every week. You can create a classroom newsletter that highlights different students or different activities that you just finished in the classroom or stuff that's coming up that you're going to do in the classroom. And then you can create some sort of acts of kindness system within the classroom that allows students to highlight random acts of kindness that other students did for that student. So we move on to my methods part. My plan was to conduct research primarily through observation. I observed how my students acted in the classroom, the relationships they formed with their peers and with their teacher, the way they talked to each other, and their overall academic performance within the classroom. So I took detailed notes, observation notes of the overall classroom community and identified different relationships amongst the peers in the class. I took observation notes of the students twice a day, so once in the morning, right after morning announcements around 9 o'clock in the morning, another time in the afternoon after second nutrition break, so around 1:30 for my school. And I tried my best to be a complete participant when conducting my observations so that students not change their behaviors when I was making notes. And so if I move on to my data, the data I collected was qualitative data. This data cannot be measured with numbers, but rather observed and classified. For the purpose of this project, I kept the classification of my observation notes very simple. For example, how the students acted in the classroom. If the behavior was more positive, it went in one pile, and if the behaviors were more negative, it went into another pile. I kept the classifying of my notes very simple and what we would refer to as black and white, and I understand that there can be other reasons behind the way a student acts in their academic performance, but for the sake of my study, I tried to keep my interpretation of the data very simple. And then my timeline. So originally I had planned that my timeline for this research would be for the whole month of my placement, but due to my circumstances with my placement and the changes that happened with my board, because they changed the assignments of the teachers at all the schools in my board, my placement for this study only ended up being for 2 weeks because I was in one class for 2 weeks and then I got changed to another class for the rest of my time. So I only based my research on my first placement. So if we move on to results, I kind of just interpret the data from the morning and the afternoon. So students' interactions and behaviors changed as the day progressed. Students' behaviors were mostly positive in the morning, and then by the time we got to the afternoon, there were some more students who had negative interactions with their peers and negative behaviors, so such as like talking out, walking out of the classroom, interrupting their peers, that kind of negative behavior. And then this just kind of shows you my guide that I use for my observation notes. So I wrote down the student's name just to help me keep track of who I observed, the time of the day, and then whether or not their behavior was positive or negative, and then their relationships with their peers were positive and negative. Their academic performance, I left the line because that was kind of open, so it was whether they participated, whether they got back a mark that day, or write down their mark, that kind of thing. And then I had an overall comment section. This just kind of helped me guide my observation notes. Yeah, so I do have some graphs to show my results from my observation notes. So this pie graph shows the average behavior in the classroom. I did combine the morning and the afternoon data all together just to show an overview of the data. So you can see that most of the behavior was positive behavior with 82% of the time. Most of the negative behavior, like I said, happened in the afternoon, so that's why the number seems so large. Yeah, the negative behavior was 18% of the time, so it's not too bad. If we look at the next graph, it shows the relationships that students form with their peers and the teacher. So I tried to observe whether or not that relationship was positive or negative, and you can easily tell by the way the students talk to each other, their body language, whether or not they're inclusive. So I found that about 73% of the time the students had positive relationships, and about 27% of the time it was kind of negative. It was more so just not being inclusive. Sharing was a big thing. And yeah, talking back was another problem I had in my placement. So, and then the last graph I had kind of showed their average academic performance of the students. So I was able to do a whole bunch of different projects and assignments with the students. So I was able to collect some of their marks back for these things. And overall, they had a good academic performance. And yeah, we had about 7 students who were achieving in the A section, about 10 students who were getting a B plus to a B minus, and then we only had 5 students that were below a C plus, which isn't too bad for 22 students. So if I move on to modifications, the only modification I make to my project is that when my placement got changed halfway through the placement time, I wished I would have kept with the research for the project. My proposed timeline for my research was for the whole month of placement. Both changes to my placement, my research was only for the 2 weeks I was in the classroom. I would have had 2 different sets of data that I could have compared to see how educators create an inclusive classroom and how it affects the students. Overall, looking at the 2 classrooms I was in, there would have been data to support both sides of the argument. So my first part of my placement, the one that I did my research on, the teacher created a good sense of community in the classroom that supported the students' learning, and the students were more engaged and they were overall positive. And I don't have data to support my second part of my placement, but just from what I remember seeing and the way I felt in the classroom, you could tell the teacher was having difficulties with creating a sense of community in the classroom, and the overall environment was more negative. However, I did not take observation notes during my second part of my placement, like I've said. So I don't have any concrete evidence to support that. And you also got to remember too that my second teacher just got a new set of kids for the second time during the school year. So they were reestablishing the community in their classroom. So that may be the reason why they were having difficulties. I'm not too sure. So if I move on to my next steps for the study, I would observe the classroom for a longer amount of time because it's hard to make a conclusion about whether there's a sense of community in the classroom when I was only observing the students and the teacher and their sense of community for only 2 weeks. I would also observe other grade levels. So my class was a primary junior class, so grade 3, grade 4. So I would want to observe more of a primary class, such as grade 1, and maybe an intermediate class just to see whether or not there is that sense of community. I think also interviewing the students about how they feel in the classroom, the relationships they have with their peers. So getting more of an understanding, having the students explain to them about their relationships and maybe stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily seen as a teacher, and then maybe creating a classroom questionnaire that would remain anonymous so that students could give their input about their sense of community in the classroom and how they are feeling. So as my conclusion, just to wrap up this presentation, I think it is important to create a sense of community in the classroom because it does help students be engaged. They do learn better. There's that line of communication that is open between the students and the teacher. There was better behavior that was happening in the classroom, and overall they perform better academically. So if you just take a look at this slide, this is just my references that I use for both Part A and Part B of this research project, and then some of these sources I did use throughout this PowerPoint presentation as well.